Welcome, everybody, to Encore's very first launch week. We're going to kick it off with a very exciting announcement. And to start it all off, your host will be myself, Andre Eriksson, and my co-founder, Marcus Kohlberg.
Hey, everyone.
Great to have you, Marcus. You want to kick it off?
Sure thing. So this is basically the agenda we have planned for launch week. So we're kicking off today. We have a huge launch we're going to announce, and then we're going to do a Q&A with everyone here in the community, answer questions I'm sure you have, especially connected to what we're launching today, but feel free to ask anything that you've thought about connected to Encore. And then we're basically going to do a live stream at this time every day this week up until Friday. We're doing a Q&A every day. And then on Thursday, we'll have a special guest come on, Bill Kennedy, who's a fairly well-known Go instructor. We're going to do a fireside chat with him. And then on Friday, we have the Hackathon Award ceremony, where we'll have Matt Boyle from Golang Insiders, the community on Twitter, who's one of our guest judges. He's going to come on, and we'll have some fun with him as well. And connected to that, if you jump to the next screen, I just want to call out that the hackathon is still ongoing. It's not too late. We've had lots of great submissions so far, but there's room for plenty more. So you have a couple more days, and all the info is on the website. So encore.dev/launch week. So you should just have fun, build something, and join in and have a chance of winning an awesome coffee maker, which I think at least 2 or 3 people on the call have that specific model. So it's Encore developer approved. I'll hand it back to you, Andre.
Absolutely. So for day one of launch week, maybe not a surprise if you've been following along, but we're very excited to announce Encore for TypeScript. So starting today, it's generally available. And what we mean by that is you can now build production-ready backends and distributed systems with Encore for TypeScript. In case you've been using Encore for Go, one thing that we want to be clear about is this does not mean that we're not supporting Go. In fact, our conviction and our sort of investment in Go is bigger than ever. What it does mean is over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be adding a lot of functionality to TypeScript to bring it up to par with Go. There are still some features for Encore for TypeScript that we haven't yet launched, but going forward, we're going to launch features for both languages and keep them both on par with each other. So we think that this brings a lot of sort of flexibility and power to backend developers because they sort of occupy 2 different sets on the spectrum in terms of backend development. You know, when it comes to Go, there's basically nothing better if you want to build anything that scales or requires that extra bit of performance. Whereas what TypeScript brings is incredible sort of productivity, especially for getting something up and running quickly. And with Encore, we'll bring the sort of best of both worlds. You can you'll be able to build and mix and match. So if you have a specific backend service that needs access to performance, you might opt for a Go service. If you want access more to the web ecosystem, you might use TypeScript. And then, of course, it's up to your preference. As we'll see, it's very, very performant on the TypeScript side as well. So what is it that we're shipping? Well, if you're familiar with Encore for Go, Encore for TypeScript is very, very similar. It's a much simpler way of building event-driven and distributed systems using TypeScript. To accomplish this, we built a custom Node.js-based runtime that's extremely high performance, and it's all written in Rust. And that brings a lot of sort of reliability and performance benefits to TypeScript. With this, because Encore is based heavily on static analysis, which is how Encore understands the type information that you have written in your program, it actually extends what you're used to in TypeScript. You might know that typically with TypeScript, you lose type information when you run the program. With Encore, that's actually different. Because with Encore, because we parse all of that before we start up, we actually use that type information to do things like validating your schema. So how does it work? Well, Node.js starts up. This is your typical Node.js process. And the very first thing it does is it starts up the Encore Rust runtime. And the Encore Rust runtime begins accepting incoming requests. And as it does that, it actually validates the incoming request and making sure that they match the API schema. Once the request has been validated, it passes that request to your application. That's the box here at the bottom. And the application will then execute your business logic. And anytime the application wants to use any sort of cloud infrastructure, it calls back to the Rust runtime. And the Rust runtime will then have all of these implementations like database integrations and PubSub and secrets and so on. And it will then call out to the infrastructure, whether that's a cloud infrastructure or a database or something like that. And in doing that, what happens is the Node.js event loop, which is single-threaded, can focus exclusively on running your business logic. And that means that anytime you want to do anything that's not pure business logic, that gets handed off to Rust, which is truly multi-threaded, and will sort of take over the execution of that. And then once the result is ready, it gets handed back to the Node.js event loop. And this is, it's pretty incredible in terms of the performance benefits. On some sort of real world use cases that we've measured, it's up to 7 times faster in terms of number of requests per second that an Encore for TypeScript service can process compared to Express, which is sort of the typical Node.js setup. It's also much lower response latency, and this is also due to the Rust runtime. And finally, even though Encore provides a lot of functionality, there are 0 NPM dependencies in this whole thing because we've actually offloaded a lot of the complexity to Rust. So it's a pre-compiled library that boots up incredibly quickly and takes over a lot of the functionality that you would typically need, hundreds, if not thousands, of NPM dependencies to use. So this is a real slam dunk in terms of performance and security. You might be familiar with a lot of sort of supply chain attacks on the NPM ecosystem, and Encore helps mitigate that as well. So just briefly, we've touched on this already, but why are we adding support for TypeScript? Well, just hearing from existing Encore users, it's really something where not everything needs the sort of scalability and performance of Go, but at the same time, you really want to benefit from Encore's approach to backend development. TypeScript is the fastest growing programming language, and there are a lot of, it's increasingly being used for more and more sort of backend development workloads. And we think it's a great match for Encore's approach and static analysis, where we think Encore can really bring something unique and valuable to the table. So with that, let's jump into a live demo right away. If you have any sort of questions as we go through, just put them in the Slack, sorry, not Slack, in the Discord channel, and we'll answer them right after the live demo. So we'll start by creating an application. We'll pick TypeScript, and let's just use a hello world as we'll just download the template. We'll be ready to go. There we go. Let's open this up. Now, if you're familiar with Encore, this should be pretty familiar. Essentially, with Encore, the way it works is you define API endpoints. With Encore for TypeScript, you import this function from the encore.dev/API package, and then you export a function that essentially is you call this and it will wrap your handler. And here we can see that we have this path here, and that gets represented here in the handler function signature. So if we take this and we do encore run, we can see immediately that it's up and running. It takes just a few milliseconds to spin up. If we go here, now we have our application. So here we can say, hello TypeScript. And we get a response, we get our logs, and we also get traces. So Encore for TypeScript comes with built-in distributed tracing, including things like request and response headers that you can expand on to see exactly what's going on inside of your request. But of course, being able to define an API endpoint is not enough. Even though we're getting things like type safety here, we have the service catalog where you have access to everything from sort of the request and the response schema, things that is super helpful. But it wouldn't be Encore if we didn't have the infrastructure integration. So let's take this example and let's expand on it. We're going to do a couple of things here, because what we have here, this is not much of a distributed system, right? It's just a single service with a single endpoint. Let's add a database. And to do that, we'll import the SQL database class here from encore.dev/storage/SQLDB. And we'll do new SQL database, and we turn off the auto completion here. So let's create a to-do database. And here we're going to add some migrations. And I know it's a bit boring, but we're going to store some to-do items here. Let's create a migration file. And we're going to say, we're going to have an ID, we're going to have a title, we're going to have a Boolean that says it's not null. Hit save, hit save. And now let's turn this into a create to do endpoint. And let's just call it to do, post, and create to do param. And to accept this incoming request, we're just gonna take in the title. And to respond, we're gonna define a full to do item, and that will have an ID. it will have a title, and it will have a done boolean. So with Encore, we can just do this. And here you get full type safety here. So immediately here, we can just start accessing our fields. And we're going to store this in the database. So we just do await query row. And here we're going to say insert into to-do, title done, values, like so. Now, if you're familiar with SQL, this might look a bit scary because we're just injecting an input here, and you might think this could lead to SQL injections, but it can't, because this is using a template literal, and that means that Encore automatically takes care of the escaping. So there's no risk of SQL injections here. It's just a really convenient way of expressing database queries. So once we have our database row, this will give us all of the values, including the ID. We can just return the ID as well as like so. Or we can just do this. So now that we refactor this, as you can see, as soon as you hit save, it recompiles. Let's go back here and go to the create to do endpoint. And here we're going to say demo encore encore for TypeScript. Hit call. You can see that this created a to do. We get ID 1, as you would expect. We get tracing, which shows the database query completed successfully, and everything is working. We can, of course, go into the database. We can query that and see that we have our to do here. So that's cool and all, but we're still just dealing with a single system. So let me just clean up the trace of it. But we're still just dealing with a single service. So let's take this and let's expand on it and add some PubSub for distributed computing. So we'll say import from PubSub the topic, and we're gonna say new to do created, and we're gonna create a PubSub topic. And here we're gonna say that the method type is our to do object, and the delivery guarantee is at least 1. So this is everything we need to do to start using PubSub. So we can just start using this immediately and say publish our to do, and we're gonna await. And now I hit save, and we go back here. If I call this again, we can see that Encore is publishing the PubSub message. We still don't have a subscriber, so let's go ahead and create that. So we're going to go ahead and create a Discord bot here. And what this Discord bot is going to do is it's going to publish to Discord a message every time we have a new to-do item. Post to Discord, we're going to say, we're going to accept this. And here we're going to define an API endpoint that will post to Discord. And to do that, what we need to do is just fetch, and now we need a URL let's leave that empty for now. We'll say method post, headers, content type, application JSON, body, we'll JSON stringify the parameters, and we'll wait for that. And if the response is not okay, we'll throw an API error saying unavailable. I don't need like so. So now we have a message here. We have an API endpoint that will post to Discord. We still need to fill in this URL. So we're going to go ahead and say webhook URL, define a secret, Discord webhook URL. We're going to import that from encore.dev/config. And now this becomes a function, and you can just call this whenever you want to access the secret value. We're going to do that. And now we actually need to set this secret, of course. So encore secret set. Now I'm going to jump over to Discord. Go to our integration here. No, sorry. I'm going to go here. We have this demo integration. We're going to copy that webhook URL. And I'll paste it in. So now if I do encore run, we go back here. We have our post to Discord endpoint. Testing Discord integration. We'll call that. And we can see here in the chat that it's working. So now we have a working Discord integration. Let's go ahead and wire this up with PubSub. So we'll say new subscription. We'll pass in the topic that we created over here. So the new to-do created. We'll say handler is, and what we'll do is await post to Discord, content, like so. So now we've created a PubSub subscription. Encore has reloaded. So now I call this, we first create our to-do. This will then publish to PubSub, which is then picked up by the Discord integration, which will then post to Discord. So in just a few minutes, we've gone from nothing to a distributed system with a database, some CRUD endpoints, PubSub, that is then being subscribed to by another service, which picks up the messages and posts them to Discord. And all in all, something like 60 lines of code. That's the power of Encore. And that's Encore for TypeScript. It's live now, so go check it out. Check out encore.dev. We have a lot of docs. We have a lot of example projects, and we'd love your feedback. So with that, ask us anything. Open the chat here in Discord and ask away. And Marcus, will you moderate and let me know what people are asking?
Yes, sir. I will. Thanks for the demo. I'm glad it worked. First time, first try. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
We had a question come in a bit earlier. Andre, would you say the new features will be landing to Go first and then be ported to TypeScript, or is a feature only ready when it's available on both?
If we have a feature that is ready, we're not going to hold off on it. We're going to launch it so that we get it in the hands of everyone as soon as possible. And Encore is open source. So if there's something that you want to see and you want to contribute, that's fantastic. And we're not going to sort of demand that you're going to do 2 implementations. So we will ship things as soon as they're ready. We think that's just good product development philosophy in general. But we will ensure that there is parity, especially when it comes to sort of core functionality. The 2 languages, they do sit on different sort of sides of the spectrum. And one thing that we worked a lot on with TypeScript is integration with the sort of full stack and front end ecosystem. And so I think that's something that is uniquely available to TypeScript that doesn't really work in the same sense for Go. So there will be minor differences between the languages, but all sort of core functionality of Encore, we're going to support in both languages. We also work very closely with our users and our customers. So we use that to inform sort of what's important for Encore users everywhere. So if there's something that you want to see, then let us know and make your voice heard. We really value feedback. So
yeah, and we're since we're here on Discord, like we're really trying to use the suggestions forum for that. So if you go in there and you see someone's posted something you also want, like put a reaction on it and comment on it to signal that you're also interested, and that gives us a better feedback loop. So even if something has been posted, don't stay silent, like be as loud as possible. But related to this question, Wilhelm put a question in that he's heard rumblings about supporting Next.js and other front-end framework hosting. Is that possible? What's going on
there? I'm glad you asked. So we have experimental support already today for doing front-end hosting in TypeScript, in Encore for TypeScript. We are going to expand on the front-end hosting over time, particularly around the sort of with TypeScript in particular, the build process is less standardized than in Go, and so that's the main missing feature when it comes to supporting front-end hosting and Next.js already today. Is we still need to ship the ability to customize the build process, which is needed for most sort of front-end frameworks, because they take your TypeScript and then they sort of compile it all down and so on. And what Encore does for you for the backend parts of TypeScript is not always exactly what you need for front-end hosting. So you can already do it. It does require jumping through a little bit of hoops. We have some examples live that are hosting a Next.js frontend. So definitely possible. Slightly, we want to polish it up a bit more before we sort of call it 100% ready. But it works and you can do it already today.
Fantastic. Another question is, what are the features that the Go version has that the TypeScript one does not have yet?
The main one is there are a couple on the bigger side of things. It's some infrastructure integrations, notably caching. that is missing, like Redis, then we haven't yet added support for middleware and the dependency injection via sort of service struct. Obviously, with TypeScript, the ecosystem, like the language is more flexible, so they're not as crucial, I want to say, as they are in Go. You can do a lot of it already just by virtue of TypeScript being so flexible. But those are the main ones that are missing. And then there are like minor features that we haven't yet added, like test tracing, for example. It's a bit trickier to do in TypeScript because there is no standard test runner. And so we're still trying to figure out how to best support that in TypeScript land. But I want to say those are the main ones. I might be missing something, but most of the functionality is already in place.
Excellent. Then Neil wants to know if there are any other languages on the horizon.
Yes. I mean, let's take a moment to celebrate TypeScript. First of all.
No, more stuff, please. Next one.
It's just 20 minutes old. So one of the main reasons why we designed Encore for TypeScript in this way with the Rust runtime is so that we can bring that performance and reliability and robustness to a wider variety of languages. So next on the horizon is Python support, which we've already looked at, and we think the Rust runtime will work perfectly for Python. We use a mechanism where 90% of the runtime is actually language agnostic, and then we have an adapter that essentially takes that language agnostic runtime and provides bindings for JavaScript. And the process of extending that to more languages will be to provide a similar set of bindings for Python, as well as implementing the static analysis and the sort of language SDK part. So it's not a trivial effort to support more languages, but a lot of the core functionality, since it lives in a language agnostic runtime in Rust, it will mean that once we add support for a new language, you'll have more of the functionality from day one because it will have already been implemented in the core runtime. So sometime later this year is what we're shooting for, but no specific date so far.
I hope that keeps the Python enthusiasts happy. I can see someone put a crab logo on the questions. Maybe you want to comment on if we're going to support Rust anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think ultimately we want to support sort of what our users, like what we're hearing from our users and other people, like startups, like what are people building. What we have seen so far, I guess, is there's substantial overlap in the sort of startups that are building with Rust and that are building with Go, in that they're building something that requires more performance. And so we think focusing on, to start with, Go, TypeScript, and Python will cover a lot of sort of different use cases. What we hear from a lot of both existing Encore customers as well as other users using Go and other startups is Python is obviously massive for machine learning in particular and AI, and that's why we think that's a great next place, is to sort of cover all of those bases and allow you to really express a lot of different use cases with Encore. So after Python, I mean, we'll see. Maybe Rust. We definitely have the foundation in place with the Rust runtime. We've also been looking at WebAssembly as a future technology that would make it easier to support additional languages. So nothing decided after Python, but if Rust is something that is really near and dear to you, then yeah, let us know. Or some other language for that.
One more question in the chat. What are some other major upcoming infra primitives on the roadmap in addition to the current ones?
Object storage. We've heard from a lot of people that support for object storage would be very appreciated. So that's next. After that, I think we'll see. We're trying to balance sort of adding new primitives with expanding on the current set of primitives. So we've also heard interest in supporting additional types of PubSub, for example. So things like Kafka is fairly popular. So whether you call that a new primitive or not, up to you. But definitely object storage is the next one.
That's excellent. I don't see any more questions right now. If you have a question, you have 10 seconds, let's say, to start typing, and then
No
we
pressure.
can give you a minute to complete it. And if we don't have any more questions, no, let's call it a day. We just want to remind you, tune in tomorrow, same time, same place, and we'll have a new exciting launch to share. And we'll see you then.
Thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks for the great questions, and looking forward to see you play around with Encore for TypeScript.
Awesome. See you, everyone.